Good afternoon. And as noted by former speakers, it's very blinding to be up here. So answer the questions. I see you guys have really started picking that up, and I'm delighted to see all the good answers. Wow. Lots of good answers. Wow. Man, some are getting a lot of attention. So when you look at that, are those some things you think you might want to be doing? Just think about that. So I'm going to talk about, let's see, how do I get this off? There we go. Should come off. Nope. It's not coming off. Okay, today we're going to talk about it's your decision. Where do you want to take your career? I'm going to start by talking about a friend of mine named Dave. Dave is a very talented software developer. And he and his wife took a year off and developed a complete system, hired some other talented people, and pretty soon they had enough interest. They started selling their product, and they hired more people, and they grew their company. And then Dave's company got acquired by a very big publicly traded software development company, and he was very happy about that, and he made a lot of money. But that moved his career up a little bit, and what Dave loved was being a software developer and being an entrepreneur. But now, since he sold his company, he had to do more than just that. He had to be a software developer, be a leader, interact with the parent company, and a lot of things that he really didn't like to do. What he liked to do was be a software developer. That's what he liked to do. So he had done all these things, and then I'm going to talk to you about what happened later from some of the choices that he made. So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about making decisions or making choices that affect your career. But you can also transplant that to making choices about anything, about whether you should become a television actor and collect residuals, whether you should dye your hair red, whether you should have children, whether you should buy this house or that house. Lots of different decisions that you will be making. So we're going to talk about making decisions, but today we're just going to talk about making decisions with respect to, do you want to become a leader in your organization? We're going to then write a brief algorithm to calculate that, and that algorithm hopefully you can use for other decisions that you might want to make. And then if this is useful to you, I'd love to get your feedback, so we'll take 2 minutes for the feedback, and finally I'll wrap up with some important things for you to take away, but also when you click into the feedback part, you get a handout that's kind of useful. So some of us started our career, and I started my career as a software developer, and I was just going along happily being a software developer, doing exactly what I loved. It's like walking down a garden path and just doing the things you love. I love being a software developer. I wanted to be a software developer for my entire career, for my entire life. I had a master's degree in computer science. I was doing fun things for a big company, and I was writing code that I loved writing. I was writing APIs, operating systems, networking. I had gotten to do a lot of fun things, and I thought that's what I would do all my life. But if you just let things happen and you're not intentional about it, you're going to end up with things that just happen to come your way. And I was very fortunate. I ended up with things that happened to come my way, and I loved it. It's like skipping down a garden path, picking the wildflowers, and coming up with a bouquet of whatever came to you, whatever floated your way. Contrast that with deciding and being very intentional and say, I want a bouquet, but I don't want to just take whatever I find. I'm going to go to the florist and I'm going to buy roses. Those are different ways of coming up with a bouquet. Similarly with your career, you can say, I'm just going to do what I love doing, and if some opportunities come my way, I'll just take them. I'm confused here, so let me just go back a bit. Okay, now I'm ready. Sorry. So do you want to just take opportunities that come your way, or do you want to say, this is what I'm going to do? So while I was being a happy software developer, I had a friend named Nancy. Nancy was, without a doubt, the best project coordinator I have ever worked with in my whole career. She was fantastic. She was great at coming up with a schedule and defining the constraints. She was great at working with each of the developers to say, how far along are you on this particular project? And instead of just taking, oh, I'm almost done, I'll have it done by next week, which is what most people will say, she would ask more specific questions. I don't know what those were, but she was really good at getting a real description of where people were in their work. And she kept the schedule very open to everyone understanding where you were. If you were writing something and people said, well, how far along are you? And they depended on your being 90% done or having it done in 2 days. They might not know if that's where you were. If you just said, oh, I'm pretty close, I'll be there pretty soon. But Nancy got it really clear. Anyway, Nancy was fabulous. She had a great career. So one day I said to her, thinking that she had a lot of potential, I said, Nancy, where do you want to take your career? And she said to me, I want to be the vice president of a big software development company. And I'm like, what? Nancy doesn't even know software development. Nancy has a business degree, and she's a project coordinator. She's not like me. I'm a developer, but Nancy knew what she wanted, and I was shocked because it had never occurred to me to ask myself that question. Where do you want to take your career? I just took what I got. So when my boss came to me and said, I'd like you to manage these 3 other developers who are working in similar areas to yours. Can you be the lead for that team? Sure. I said, sure. I didn't think, okay, if I choose to be the lead for that team, what is that going to mean? What does that imply? Does it mean I'm not going to be able to spend as much time developing code? Does it mean I'm going to have to do things that I didn't want to do before, like performance reviews? I don't know. I didn't think about those things. I just said, sure. And then a few weeks later, he came to me and said, well, I need you to manage this remote group in a different state. So now you'll have 2 groups, this group of 3 people here, and a group of 7 people in a different state, a 3-hour flight away. And my boss didn't ask me if I wanted to do this. He just presented it and told me he wanted me to do it. So I said, okay. What I did not think about at that time was when I accepted that, that meant my time for developing code and writing code was shot. It was all downhill because I was spending time flying back and forth, leading people who are on a different project that I didn't really know that much about, learning about their culture, learning about how to lead them, and doing performance reviews and doing one-on-ones and interacting with other departments, the tech support and the documentation and the testing, all this interaction with other departments that I now had to do that I hadn't had to do before. And marketing, who would have thought? So why I'm telling you that story about myself is that I made a choice. The choice was given to me, and I said, okay, yeah, I can do that. And did not think about the implications of that decision. And you can think about the implications of your decisions, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So when you have a choice, do you want to take this job or not? You can decide. When you have a choice, do you want to have children or not? Well, you can make a choice, or you could just say, I don't know. Do you want to buy this house or that house? I don't know. But you can either decide, or you can stand there saying, I don't know what I want to do. How many of you have been in that situation where you just didn't know? Yeah, you don't know all the time. A lot of times you're just like, I don't know, because I haven't thought through the implications, and I'm just not going to decide. So you're going to let fate or other people or other things or time make that decision for you. For example, if you were thinking, I really want to buy that house, and you go, I can't decide. I don't know, I like this one, I like that one. I can't make up my mind. Well, pretty soon, other people have bought those two houses, and they're not available anymore. Fate, or time in that case, has made the decision for you. So you didn't make the decision. Fate made the decision for you. So here is one of my favorite quotes. It's sort of from Jean-Paul Sartre, philosopher. Not to decide is to decide. So all those times when you say, I can't make up my mind, I can't decide what I want to do, well, that's deciding that you're going to let fate or somebody else make that decision for you. So does that make that phrase make sense to you? Not to decide is to decide? It sounds a little funky. It sounds like I'm going around in some bad circle. But in fact, if you don't make the decision, if you just sit there and let your options be out there, but you're not making a decision, well, you're deciding to let fate make that decision. Not to decide is to decide. So I just want to talk to you about being intentional. You can intentionally decide, I'm not going to decide. I'm going to let fate make that decision for me. Or you can be very intentional and say, I'm going to evaluate what the implications are if I say yes, and I'm going to evaluate what the implications are if I say no. I'm going to evaluate the choices that I'm making. So I want you to think about being intentional in evaluating the implications of your choices. You can decide to be a software developer for your whole career, and that's a fine decision. Or you can decide you want to go down a different path. Maybe you decide, I want to go down a leadership path. You're probably here because that was the question, sort of, that this talk presented, if you want to be a leader. So I'm urging you to at least evaluate the choices and be intentional. My friend Nancy, who is such a great project coordinator, she was very intentional. She took only positions that were leading her in the path to become the vice president of a big software company. And 10 years later, she was the chief operating officer of a medium-sized software company. A few years after that, she was the vice president of a bigger software company. She knew exactly what path she wanted to take, and she didn't get led off to be going down stray paths that weren't in her way, or that weren't presented to her. Now, I took a different choice, and I decided to try out a lot of things. So when I had the opportunity to be, I was given the opportunity to be the IEEE, what is it called, fellow for policy and technology and policy in Washington, D.C., and I got to work in Congress for a year as an aide in one of the legislators' office, one of the U.S. congressmen. When I thought about that, I didn't know what to do. I thought, I don't know if I want to do that. I've got my family here in Austin, Texas. Do I want to move to Washington, D.C. for a year? I don't know. And my friend, who had done this a few years before, and she'd actually written some part of legislation, she said, "It'll change your life." And I said, "I like my life." Why do I want to change my life? I like my life. I'm doing what makes me happy. But ultimately, I did have an opportunity to do that, to move to Washington, and my husband could go with me for at least 6 months. So I decided, what the heck, this will be an adventure. I'll learn new things. And it was an adventure. And I got to learn a lot of new things. I got to learn about biology. I got to learn about robotics. I got to learn about the space program. I got to learn about how to find jobs for our veterans who are coming back from whatever war it was in 2012. Hate to think about that. In any case, I made choices that were more serendipitous. This opportunity comes to me, I think about it, I evaluate the options, and I go with it. It wasn't like Nancy, who said, I'm only going to take opportunities that lead me down this path. But both worked. So let's go back to the story of Dave. So Dave loved being a software developer. He loved being an entrepreneur. But he didn't care about all the people skills that come with being a leader. He didn't care about doing things like project management, performance reviews, hiring and firing, and promoting or not promoting. He didn't want to do a lot of the things that were not part of writing code and designing a new product. He liked doing that, but he didn't really like doing the people stuff. And he didn't care about essentially managing up. An entrepreneur is managing down. But now he got acquired, and he had to manage up. He had to communicate with others in the company about the things that he was working on, and the things that they were working on and that mattered to him. But he did not do that. And sadly, the project schedule slipped. And I can talk about that for another hour, but I'm not going to today. But the project schedule slipped, and they slipped some more, and they slipped about a year. And this made the parent company really mad. And so they divested themselves after maybe 7 or 8 years of having Dave's company within the parent company. They just divested themselves of that, and Dave was out on the street with a great software development mind, some experience being an entrepreneur, but now he had to start all over again. He had not really paid attention to the implications of his decisions. So now we're going to go back to considering the responsibilities of a leader. In a minute, I'll show you the word cloud that you guys created. But what are some of those implications of being a leader? If that is an opportunity that presents itself to you, is that something you want to do? So what are those? Those people responsibilities take up a lot of your time. Strategy, communication takes up so much time. You have to be communicating up, across, down. You have to be communicating to investors. You have to communicate to customers. You have to communicate to a lot of different types of folks. And then there's the issue of doing budgets. If it's up to me, I don't want to be doing budgets. That's just not even fun. for me. But maybe for you, you think it's really fun. It's different for each of us. We're all different. And negotiations, negotiating for resources, like I need this many people to finish this project and I need this much firepower in terms of machines and communication and devices. I'm going to need all that. So those are some of the things that people need to think about, and unfortunately Dave didn't think about that. So let's look at oof. It always disconnects while I'm doing this. Let's look at your word cloud again. Ah, there we are. Yay, Slido works. So there's a lot here about motivating. A lot of people wrote in motivate and trust, encourage, lead by example, mentor. Those are all really important things that leaders do. Be present, anticipation, evangelizing, lead. Of course, you're for a leader, you got to lead. Enabling people, inspiring people, guidance, employee satisfaction. There's a lot of stuff here about working with your employees, and these are not things that, if you're a really happy software developer like I was when I was very young, those weren't on my list of tasks, but those are on the list of tasks for leaders, and I got sent down that path. Fortunately, I loved it. Fortunately, it was a good fit for me, but that wasn't the path I chose. It was a path that came to me, and then I decided, okay, I'll go on this path. All right, so the next thing I want you to do is consider how you would create an algorithm to evaluate the implications of your decisions if you were to make a career change, or if you were to make any important change in your life, to get married, to have children, to move to another country, whatever the important career changes might be. Decide, what data do you want to gather? How much do you want to gather? You don't want to be paralyzed by gathering data for 3 weeks. And how will you gather that data? That is, how. And then after that, you evaluate and print out the result. That's pretty straightforward. So here's one way of gathering data. That's on some kind of scale of, in this case, it's 0 to 6 or 1 to 6. I'm a logician, I start with 0. Questions like, would you be satisfied or happy to, or whatever, spend 10% of your time communicating up the food chain in your organization? Yes or no? How happy would you be? 0 or 6? 6 is high. I think it says the max. How happy would you be dealing with a prima donna who's upsetting your entire organization, and you have to figure out how you're going to fix this? Are you going to fire this prima donna? Are you going to work with the prima donna until they get better and people are willing to communicate with them again? That's my biggest challenge that I've had, and it worked. So I spent a lot of time working on helping a prima donna become a human being again. It worked. That was good. So that's one way to gather data. Another way is just a sort of a yes-no kind of way. Is this desirable or undesirable? Is it desirable or undesirable to you, or where does it fit, to spend 50% of your time on schedules and budgets and whatever? So take some time and work with. Last time I had this lecture, people were at round tables. This time, it's just the opposite. You guys are in gigantic, high seating. So consider how you're going to combine and weigh the data that you've gathered. What are you going to map? What are you going to input, and how are you going to do that? How much are you going to do? And then how are you going to weigh those? Like, some things you're going to weigh more because they are more important to you. Some things you're going to weigh less. So work with someone who's sitting near you or behind you or in front of you, and take a few minutes to think about how you would do this. How are you going to evaluate the implications of a decision? And in this case, we're specifically talking about moving from a position of doing a lot of software development to doing a lot of leadership. And if you're already in a leadership position, what about the next level up in the leadership hierarchy? How would you feel about that? So take 5 minutes, talk to your neighbor. How would you gather data, and how would you evaluate it? Make sense? Any questions? I'm happy to answer questions.
What is the objective, the final?
The objective is to come up with a method or an algorithm to help you in whatever decisions you have to make. Once you've gone through the process of figuring out a method for making the decision of do you want to move into leadership, you can apply that method to any situation where an opportunity presents itself and you have to figure out, do I want to do this or not? Okay? So that's the objective. The objective is to give you a little bit of thoughtfulness about evaluating options. Does that make sense? Okay. Talk to your friends. Some of you are going to have to move around a little bit. I'm going to come around and talk to you. Okay, so back to the slides and the process. I'm checking my time. 6:20. Okay, I think we're good. How was that for you? Describe your experience. Think about your experience. How was that? In some cases, it's hard, and in some cases, people think, okay, this is easy. I do this all the time anyway. So would you two gentlemen, Makas and Alejan, come talk about it for the group? You're easy to get here. That's why I picked you, because you're so close. Come on up. Oh, good. Thank you so much. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Hello.
So how was that for you?
Yeah, for us, we just tried to come up with a number of items or questions, and then we assigned some weightages to them. Like, for example, if you spend like 20% of your time on, for example, reviews, employee reviews, would that be something you would consider to do in the future? And for all of the questions, we evaluated them and then come up with a score. And then you can just decide some threshold, like if the score is, for example, greater than 0.7 or something, then you can decide.
All right.
And we also had a chat about one more thing instead of having an algorithm. So it was like, what are my qualities that should be like we gave that a very high percentage. So for example, what are our qualities and what are our priorities as well. So we discussed about, okay, so what are our qualities? Do we have a quality of being a leader? Okay, it's not like always everybody has a quality of leadership or something, but the thing is like everyone has some quality actually. So they need to find that and try to sharpen those skills and then go that way. So we also discussed about that, and so the algorithm Rihan gave, so it was similar to that.
So they added into their algorithm discussion their own qualities and their own skills. So some people don't want to talk to other people. They like to be in a corner just writing their code by themselves. And for them, the whole idea of all these people skills just isn't a fit. But thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate that. So thank you. Anybody else want to come talk about their experience doing this? I can't see if you're raising your hand or if I'm just blind, but I think you're not raising your hand, so I'm going to take that as you're happy just sitting where you are, and it's a long way to the front. Okay, so I think this is a good experience to just be able to figure out how to evaluate choices. It's hard. It's more intentional than evaluating the choice between, am I going to have Italian food for dinner or Indian food for dinner? You know, that's a simple choice. You just go, okay, I really like Indian food. I'm going to have that. Or I'm going to try Norwegian food. I haven't ever tried that. So anyway, you can use that process to evaluate decisions in your life. So I would like, if you found this to be useful or valuable, I would love if you would scan the code and this process takes 2 minutes and that's it. And I would like to get your feedback. I got feedback last week that helped me a lot with my presentations, but I would love to get your feedback and to thank you. I have a nice little handout about communication skills, which everybody needs, whether they're a leader or not. So thank you very much. And we'll be back to this discussion in 2 minutes and some final wrap-up words for you. If you are speakers, I highly recommend this tool called Talkadot. It's a great tool to get evaluations and a chance for you to hand out some freebies to your audience without having to hand out pieces of paper. You get that instantly, by the way. Okay, I think everybody's had enough time. So let's talk about the process. Oops. So when you're making a decision, first of all, you start at this circle called ACT. And you're just going along, you're doing whatever you're doing, you're just acting in the normal way, and then suddenly an opportunity presents itself to you, and you have to consider the choices and make a decision. And sometimes people just consider the choices, yes, no, and then they make a decision really quickly. But what I'm encouraging you to do is, instead of making that decision really quickly, move over to that blue circle and identify the implications of each decision. These guys over here asked me if I'd ever had to use this technique to make a decision, and I've used this technique to make a decision, and I was really stuck. I had 3 job offers. I didn't know which one to take, and so I used I evaluated the implications, and I still was struggling to evaluate them. I evaluated them, and I still couldn't figure out which one I wanted. So I used the technique of imagining that I chose option 1 and going to sleep and see how I felt in the morning. The next night, I imagined that I'd chosen option 2. I went to sleep and see how I felt in the morning. Then I imagined that I'd chosen option 3, woke up in the morning, see how I felt. That worked. I chose 1, and I was good to go. But what I'm encouraging you to do is evaluate, first of all, identify the implications and then evaluate them. It's not hard. You can do this. And just remember, not to decide is to decide. So I'd love it to hear from you. I'd love to hear from you. I'm always happy to help people with their career decisions. People that I've been in my workshops have kept in touch with me for years, and I'm always there to just listen to what they're thinking and then give them a few thoughts about, okay, this is what I'm hearing. So you guys can contact me. There's no charge. Just contact me and say, I don't know what to do. Here's my situation, and I'll ask you some questions. And believe me, you'll have an answer for yourself, not my answer. Heck no, your answer, because it's all about you. So thank you very much. Enjoyed being with you.